Evet, sevgili izleyicilerimiz, Ankara Üniversitesi Asya Pasifik Araştırmaları Uygulama ve Araştırma Merkezi APAM olarak e, yeni bir programa başlamaya karar verdik. Burada amacımız vatandaşlarımızı, akademisyenlerimizi, daha geniş bir anlamda Asya Pasifik'e ilgi duyan tüm yerli, yabancı araştırmacıları e, yapacağımız sohbetlerle, Asya sohbetleriyle bilgilendirmek ve onlara yeni ufuklar açıkçası sağlayabilmek. Ve bu amaçla elimizden geldiği kadarıyla Asya Pasifik bölgesini çalışan, araştıran, inceleyen, bölgede yaşamış akademisyenler, konu uzmanları, ticaret insanları, iş insanları, diplomatlar olabildiği kadarıyla edebiyatçılar belki yani Asya'yı yaşayan, Asya'yı koklayan, e, Asya'yı bilen ve bize Asya'yı anlatabilecek toplumun her kesiminden insanlarla Asya sohbetleri teması altında konuşarak böyle bu zor günlerde, Covid günlerinde ve inşallah Covid geçtikten sonra da yani bu konu üzerine, Asya konusu üzerine meraklıları bilgilendirmek üzere böyle bir program yapmaya karar verdik. Ve bu programlarımızı ya kısmen işte Zoom üzerinden ya da diğer teknolojik araçları kullanarak ya canlı olarak yapacağız. Yani hem canlı olarak yapılacak hem kaydedilecek. Daha sonra kanalımızda, YouTube kanalımızda yayınlanacak. Ya da sadece önceden röportajlar yaparak, sohbetler yaparak bunları daha sonra YouTube kanalımıza yükleyeceğiz. Ve böylelikle dediğim gibi sadece akademisyenleri değil ama vatandaşlarımızı da, Asya'yı merak eden insanlarımızı ya da hani boş vakitlerini değerlendirmek isteyen insanlarımızı da bilgilendirmek için bu programımızı başlatmaya karar verdik. Malumunuz bendeniz Profesör Doktor Ali Mertan Dündar, Ankara Üniversitesi Asya Pasifik Çalışmaları kısa adıyla APAM müdürlüğünü yapıyorum. Aynı zamanda Dil ve Tarih Coğrafya Fakültesi Japon Dili ve Edebiyatı Anabilim Dalı'nda e, öğretim üyesi olarak çalışıyorum. E, Yani dediğim gibi bizim derdimiz, meselemiz Asya'yı anlamak ve anlatmak. Bu yolda da, bu ilk programımızda da Ankara Üniversitesi'nin konuk araştırmacısı olarak, APAM'ın konuk araştırmacısı olarak Kore'den teşrif etmiş olan Sayın Doktor Jo Song Lee Bey ile bir toplantı yapmaya, bir sohbet yapmaya karar verdik. Sağ olsun kendisi bizi kırmadı. Kendisi Covid salgınının biraz öncesinde Türkiye'ye gelmişti. Yaklaşık 1-1,5 yıl kadar merkezimizde konuk araştırmacı olarak çalışacaktı. Ancak arz ettiğim üzere bu salgından dolayı maalesef teşviki mesaimizi ancak bu teknolojik malzeme üzerinden gerçekleştirebiliyoruz. Ama zannederim inşallah bu salgın bittikten sonra daha başka programlarda bir arada olacağımız gibi akademik çalışmaları da beraber yapabileceğimizi umut ediyorum. İzin verirseniz ben kısaca Bay Doktor Yi ise tanıtmak isterim. Müsaadenizle okuyacağım kağıttan. Doktor Jo Song Yi, Hong University Foreign Studies Üniversitesi'nde öğretim üyesi olarak, öğretim elemanı olarak çalışıyor. Aynı zamanda demin bahsettiğim üzere merkezimizin konuk araştırmacısı. Kendisinin yine Hong Üniversitesi'nde e, Political Science bölümünde PhD'si var. Siyaset bilimi üzerine araştırmalarda bulunmuş. Kendisi daha evvel orduda görev almış. 3 yıl kadar Deniz İstihbarat Subaylığı yapmış. Daha sonra 4 yıl kadar Japon düzeltiyorum Kore'nin Dışişleri Bakanlığı'na bağlı Milli Güvenlik Dışişleri ve Milli Güvenlik Kurulu'nda 4 yıl kadar araştırmacı olarak çalışmış. Bu manada bölgenin problemlerine Kore, Çin, Japonya buradaki bu meselelere akademik olarak ve mesleki olarak da yatkın olduğunu söylemem lazım. Ve 2018'den bu yana da e, yine Hong Üniversitesi'nde Foreign Studies bölümünde öğretim elemanı olarak çalışıyor. Bu kısa tanıtımı bundan sonraki sohbetimizi İngilizce olarak devam edeceğiz. Müsaade ederseniz bu tanıtımı kısaca İngilizce olarak da yapıp Daha sonra Sayın İ'ye sorularımı ben ardı ardına soracağım ve kendisinin sorularımızı cevaplamasını rica edeceğim. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Jo Sung Lee, again, this time in English. Dr. Jo Sung Lee is a lecturer. He is at Hankook University of Foreign Studies, and he is also visiting researcher at Ankara University Asia Pacific Research Center, APAN, and we are very happy for that. And Dr. E has a PhD in political science, Hankook University of Foreign Studies. A brief more information about him. Dr. E served as a naval intelligence officer for 3 years at South Korean Navy and worked as a researcher for 4 years in the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security, South Korea, MOFA, lecturer in Hankook University of Foreign Studies since 2018, right? So Dr. Johnson E, Mr. E, by E, very welcome. Hoş geldiniz.
Thank you.
So in order to use our time effectively, I would like to ask 3 main questions, and each question has a sub question actually. So could you please teach us and answer these questions? And the first one is, the COVID-19 has changed everything around the world. What about Northeast Asia? And plus question for this main topic, did COVID-19 also have a massive impact on the security dynamics in Northeast Asia too? This is also important for us. And the second question, the newly elected President Biden will take office tomorrow. So do you think this will make a significant change in the region too? What will change and what will not change? And the last question. Lastly, what do you think is the most significant issue between Turkey and South Korea? What are the new areas or issues that our 2 countries can work on in order to further improve our relationship? So, Dr. Jo Sung E, this is your turn. Thank you very much. We are listening here.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. It is a great honor to be a member of APAN in Ankara University. And I would also like to thank you, Hojang, for inviting me as a guest as a speaker for today's session. So before I answer your questions, about 6 questions, I have prepared some slides regarding the geopolitical calculation and foreign policy of South Korea. So I will begin with that, and right after the presentation, I will try to answer all 6 questions if time allows, okay?
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
So let me share my PowerPoint file just for a second. Okay, hadi bakalım. Today I'd like to talk about South Korea's foreign policy. Excuse me. These are the contents. First, I'd like to talk about some geopolitical background about South Korea, and then I will briefly show how South Korea formed and developed its foreign policy, including the current Moon Jae-in administration, and finally, the conclusion. First, the geopolitical environment. Many geopolitical scientists argue, and I also agree, that geography determines the fate of a state. South Korea was never an exception. Instead, we were one of the typical cases that proves this kind of proposition. Let's have a look at the map. As you can see, South Korea is in the center of Northeast Asia, and we have always been at the center of regional power rivalry, stuck between China, the US, Soviet Union in the past, and Russia and Japan. Also, geographers describe the Korean Peninsula as a bridgehead. However, this bridgehead was not beneficial for us. Actually, it was only beneficial for the others. For example, Japan from the south, they used us and used this bridgehead to march to the main continent, and nomads in the north, in these regions, they moved down and looted us and kidnapped our people. And China, the mainland here, they used us as a buffer zone against those invasions. I will show you some examples throughout our history. In the ancient times, once a very strong dynasty called Gojoseon were constantly invaded by Han Dynasty, and they broke down in BC 108. And during the Three Kingdoms era, Goguryeo and Baekje were also constantly invaded by the Chinese Tang Dynasty. In the Goryeo period, the Korean peninsula was looted by the nomads in the north, namely Liao Dynasty and Jin Dynasty. But this was just a warm-up because in the early 13th century, Mongolian invasion also swept all the way to Goryeo. So they invaded us 6 times. They looted our resources, took our people, took everything, every foothold we had at that time. And also Japanese raids disturbed Goryeo from the south. The Japanese raids reached over 500 times, and also it was coupled with nomads invasion from the north, namely the Honggonjaks. And this made our land become devastated. And in the Joseon era, the situation did not get any better. Maybe the situation got worse than before. And the shogun of Japan launched a massive invasion twice, bringing more than 200,000 troops each time. And these kind of Japanese invasions reached its climax with Imjinweran and so on. And so Joseon dynasty, just like the Goryeo dynasty, had to fight 2 wars all the time, one from the south and one from the north. So these kind of invasions made our land unable to recover. So ultimately, Japan managed to take the control of the bridgehead. Then since Japan marched upwards, defeating the China in 1894, and also in 1904, defeating the Russians, the Russian Navy in the East Sea, they finally, and for us, unfortunately, they colonized us in 1910. From that time, about 70 years have passed, but the situation did not change much. And we cannot say that it got any better. The security environment have never changed. And Korea is still divided into 2, divided into North and South. And making things worse, North Korea possesses a nuclear weapon now. And Korea is stuck between the US and China, the 2 global powers, and Japan is still a conflicting actor rather than a cooperative one. So, as geographers always say, the geography can never change. We are situated in it and we cannot change it. So we have to devise every means, every effort in order to survive from it. That was the only solution we had. So foreign policy in that sense was very, very important. So against this backdrop, let's have a look at South Korea's foreign policy. So as I mentioned earlier, Korea was more or less dictated by the geography. So Korea's foreign policy was also bound to this factor. After the Second World War, South Korea gained its independence. However, the chewing time was really, really short. Korea once again fell under the shackles of geopolitics, so-called the Cold War framework, and we became a prisoner of geography once again. Korean Peninsula was divided into 2 in 1948, and the Korean War lasted for 3 years. And even after the truce, division remained until now. And due to the circumstances, South Korea's geopolitical field was foreshortened to the Korean Peninsula, and South Korea's foreign policy, most of the assets were concentrated in dealing with the North Korea, our arch enemy. And our first president, Lee Seung-man, was born under this legacy. So his vision of liberating North Korea was quite natural. Our priority was on restoring the North Korean land and to liberate the people from the Soviet influence. Therefore, Lee Seung-man restlessly urged his ally, the United States, to march north for unification. The photograph in the center is a proof to show his endless request for the unification and to march north. And the photograph on the left, it says, "Do not forget 625, which was the Korean War, the date of Korean War. And on the right, it says, our goal is to march north. And next president, Park Chung-hee, his main focus was also the same, almost the same, North Korea and unification. But one thing that is different is that the strategy changed. He believed that the key in securing the upper hand against the North is to raise national power and wealth. So how did he do it? Through economic development and modernization. As you can see, Hyundai and Samsung at that time was created, and petrochemical industry and other industry and infrastructure were developed at that time. And the result was the miracle of Han River. Let's have a look at the per capita income on the left. As you can see, right after the right after the Korean War, in 1953, it was barely 67 US dollars. However, in 1980, in 1980s, 1977, it exceeded to 1,000 US dollars. And in terms of export volume, it reached $100 million in 1964. It tripled, then it reached $1 billion, and it went well over $10 billion in 1977. And after Park Chung-hee's assassination, Chun Doo-hwan became our next president. And after witnessing some economic miracles and seeing how much Korea changed and so on, he dreamt of being an international actor. And he also wanted to make South Korea an international player. So in 1988, the Seoul Olympics was the biggest fruit that he achieved. And economy also steadily grew, as you can see from the graph, and it reached 100 billion US dollars in 1986. However, these economic achievements did not guarantee South Korea into an international level at all, because we always had the North Korean factor, which was lagging us behind. And during that time, we had two big terror committed by North Korea. The first one was in Burma during the Yangon Cemetery ceremony, and one was Korean air bombing terror in the 1980s. Next president in the Roh-tae period, Korea finally went international. He was the first president to widen his scope to the Northeast Asian region from a myopic Korean peninsula. So we reached out to the Soviet Union, China, and then we continuously reached out to the communist states in Eastern Europe with some economic assistance. And these efforts, the ultimate goal was to normalize diplomatic relations with the communist states, but it was also to encourage Korean unification with this kind of momentum. And now the Kim Dae-jung administration. President Kim actually came up with the most concrete geopolitical code, and it was called the Sunshine Policy. And this Sunshine Policy comes from a fable, or hikayat from Aesop. And for those who do not know about this story, I will briefly explain. As you can see from the picture here, there was a competition between sun and wind. They have made a bet, and whoever takes off the traveler's coat would win the match. So the wind started first. It did its best to blow off the coat of a traveler. However, with all the efforts, the traveler just grasped tighter on his coat. So, Allah, it was a failure. Then another competitor, sun, it turned off, and it started to heat up the traveler, different strategy. And finally, the traveler took off his clothes one by one. Aha, the message here is very simple. President Kim Dae-jung believed that South Korea should show amicable attitudes towards the North, which means help the North. Then North will hold our hand and eventually disarm, and we will eventually be united. Actually, it surely was a great shift of perception as well as its strategy. So in order to show its sincerity, South Korea steadily provided economic aids and investments to the North Korea in spite of North Korea's military provocations and hostile rhetorics. And this led to a historic summit meeting in 2000, which was held in Pyongyang. And he became the first Korean president to visit North Korea. However, there were also pessimisms on this sunshine policy. His opponents condemned that he just bought peace temporarily without receiving any assurance of North Korean regime's changes. And in fact, North Korea continuously provoked South. During the Seoul World Cup period in 2002, North Korea attacked our Navy vessel in Yeonpyeong Island in the West Sea. And the result was 6 Navy soldiers were killed in action and one of our patrol ship sank from this provocation. Even though the North did not show much of a mutual respect, the next president, Roh Moo-hyun, inherited the geopolitical code of Kim Dae-jung. And he actually wanted to upgrade the idea. So his goal was to promote mutual peace and prosperity of the two Koreas in order to reach the stage of peaceful unification. And in order to do this, he has specifically divided into 3 steps. And you can read them from the slides, 1, 2, 3. And as a result, another historical summit meeting was held in Pyongyang, again in 2007. President Lee Myung-bak, however, was evaluated as an utilitarian. He did not only focus on North Korea, so he made an outreach to the ASEAN region, European Union, and he also tried to take a role in the G20s. And for North Korean issue, he believed that economic incentives will eventually lead the North to give up their their nuclear weapon. However, his wishful thoughts were also proved a failure. North Korea never changed. First of all, in 2008, Korean tourist, this lady, was shot in North Korean resort in Kumgangsan. And in 2010, Korean Navy vessel called Cheonanham was shot by North Korean submarine and sank in 2010. And again, North Korea shelled the South Korean island, Yeonpyeong-do, in 2010. So the next president, Park Geun-hye, after witnessing these shifts, bashing and seducing, back and forth, bashing again, seducing again, and she thought that I need to balance the both. So she devised a geopolitical code of Korean Peninsula trust building process. So the point is, she believed that only trust building can overcome the Asia paradox in the region. And just for reference, Asia paradox means that it's a mismatch between growing economic interdependence on the one hand, but backward political and security cooperation. So in order to build trust in the region, she reached out to China and Russia. And also she asserted that Korean unification will be the key to these initiatives. And she even called it a bonanza or jackpot. However, the achievements were below expectations. There were huge discrepancy between her vision and the practice. And North Korea never answered back in earnest. And as you can see from the map here, without unification, her plan to reach out to China and reach out to Russia all the way to Europe, those ideas cannot be reached without amicable relationship with the North and ultimately unification. Okay, finally, the current government. I'm sorry that it's a little bit longer than I have expected. So the current Moon Jae-in administration, they inherited the philosophy of President Kim Dae-jung and the strategy of President Roh Moo-hyun. So current government our geopolitical code is named Northeast Asia Plus Community of Responsibility. As you can see from this diagram, our government tries to make a vision to reach out beyond the players in the Northeast Asia region for support and cooperation. It is consisted of two main pillars, the pillar of peace and pillar of prosperity. It means that South Korea will build a peaceful and cooperative environment in the region through the axis of peace, and also at the same time, try to construct a bridge of prosperity through this axis of prosperity. It involves key players such as obviously the Northeast Asia region and also India, the ASEAN states, and beyond all over to the Eurasian region, including all these countries in the northern part. So for the pillar of peace, it is named the Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Platform. The names are a little bit difficult, but in here, the platform is very important. It means that it is a place which allows all the stakeholders to freely assemble and share their opinions. So it's not like a coercive structure to pressure the North Korea. It is rather a platform which creates the order and the mood for regional peace and cooperation. So ultimately making the North Korea want to join this platform. And also South Korea wants to use this platform to take care of some transnational threats. So it can be such as terrorism, epidemics, cyber crimes, and so on. And in the times of COVID pandemics, just like now, this kind of platform is very, very important and more needed. And in terms of pillar of prosperity, New Northern Policy pays attention to the potential of the Eurasian market and to the possibility of making links with China's One Belt and One Road initiatives. And as you can see from the photo on the left, the new economic map, it shows how the Korean Peninsula as a bridgehead will operate to connect the Northeast Asia region all together into a mutually benefiting community. So that's why we use the word community. And then this new economic map will be enlarged into a global level to reach out to the Eurasian continent. So these are the specific projects. We call it 9-bridge strategy. You can just see through what they are, 9 of them. And in case of New Southern Policy, it focuses on the ASEAN region, obviously. But the difference here is that this vision is not only concerned with economic gains. The main goal here is to realize a human-centered community again, between South Korea and the ASEAN countries. So in order to do this, we have 16 sub goals here. And they are mostly including security cooperation, defense cooperation, trade and investment, infrastructure, smart industry, but also tourism, cultural exchange, overseas training, and so on. Okay, finally, the conclusion. So for Moon Jae-in administration, the biggest achievement so far was the changes in the North. The platform brought North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to come back to the dialogue. This guy. In 2018, there were 3 consecutive inter-Korean summits, which were held in April, May, and September. And just for reference, the latest one was held in 2007 in Nomuyan administration. And also in Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, which was held in February 2018, Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, this lady over here, she visited the South with the North Korean delegations. It was, as far as I know, it was the first time since 1950 for the North Korean royal family member, so-called, to visit the South. And the pillar of peace has reached an upper stage with progress in convincing the North Korean leader and President Trump to hold a dialogue. the two sides made a historical meeting in Singapore in June 2018. And this was the first summit ever between the two states. And then in June 2019, the two leaders met again in the military demarcation line on the Korean Peninsula. And the three leaders met together and made a brief talk on historical event. In terms of pillar of prosperity, we have also witnessed some gradual developments, and South Korea and Russia are actively cooperating in the railroad and North Pole section. And also South Korea and China also discussing about merging and connecting each other's vision. So South Korea's pillar of prosperity with China's Belt and Road initiatives. And also in 2018, as you can see from the graph and diagram, ASEAN became the largest trade partner of South Korea. And at that year, it even exceeded the amount between Korea and China for the first time. And the foreign direct investment, as you can see, in 2019 was almost doubled compared to the year 2017. However, here is the problem and always some of the shortcomings. The biggest dilemma was, of course, it was very ironic, but also quite obvious. The dilemma was North Korea. Even with 3 summits, we still face North Korean nuclear weapon, and the North Korean leadership still expresses animosity and distrust against us. And another big problem is that, please have a look at the map. As I mentioned earlier, the success of Moon Jae-in administration's geopolitical code, North Korea is an inevitable keystone here, because the success of Pillar of Peace depends on the amicable inter-Korean relationship. So if our northern side is blocked, then it becomes, the platform becomes merely just a hollow vision, just like the previous Park Geun-hye administration. So, and also without the guarantee of peace, the pillar of prosperity might also lose its momentum. And another problem lies in the prolonged mistrust among the regional players, so-called Asia paradox. We are right now in the middle of a fierce, G2 trade war between the US and China. And the both sides are urging us to choose one side, not swinging between. And we still have trade disputes with Japan, and it has become more or less of an anti-sentiment warfare or something like that. So maybe we still could not escape from the Asia paradox, and moreover from this kind of geographical prison, so-called. And the big proposition the geographers used to say, the geography can never change and geography determines the fate. And this proposition still persists. All of these due to the Cold War legacy and because of North Korea, most of our diplomatic and economic assets were poured into the Korean Peninsula issues. And we always lacked the resources and investment capabilities due to this factor. And so we have become a global player and a middle power in the international arena, but our backdoor is always unstable. However, we never gave up. We cannot change the geography, but we managed to turn these liabilities into opportunities. So in times of perfect storm, just like during the Goryeo or Joseon era, we managed to thrive as a trade hub of Northeast Asia. As a bridgehead, we received and disseminated advanced cultures from China, from Arabia, from Europe, and we disseminate them through to Japan or to the nomads in the north and even Russia on the north. So these kind of situation has always existed, and now in the 21st century, we would like to revive that spirit once again. We cannot say that the situation got much, much better, but we cannot say that the chances are lower than those periods. And another biggest asset is, ironically, the surviving mentality. Many dynasties around the world disappeared, but as you can see, as you have heard today, we managed to survive and we thrived with the miracle of the Han River. So in total, I have found some records, and it says that we have overcome more than 900 invasions from our neighbors, and all those wounds became a soil for our development. And we thought that we could not overcome our geography nor the geopolitical prison, but seeing it upside down, it may not be a prison after all. South Korea, who had been other people's bridgehead for a long time, is now dreaming to become a bridgehead towards the world. And we are still working on it, and our government and our people are still working on it to become a bridgehead and become a hub of international trade, international communication, and that would also include the relationship with the Turkey and so on. So that's about it. Thank you for your time, and this is the end of my presentation. So now I will try to answer the questions that you have asked me. So there were about 6 questions, 3 big ones and 3 sub-questions. So I will try to merge the sub-questions into the big ones. So basically, I will try to answer 3 big questions. Okay, the first question was on COVID-19 and its impact on the security dynamics of Northeast Asia. Well, the COVID-19, as we all know, surely has brought major changes around the world. And I personally believe that we finally see the real face of globalization and the collapse of so-called the world leadership. Many scholars argue, and I also agree, that due to the pandemics, anti-globalization and nationalistic behaviors are much more deepening. In terms of East Asian security, however, I believe that COVID-19 did not directly change the dynamics itself. Rather, the COVID-19 seems to bring alternations in the degree of the dynamics. For example, before and after the COVID-19, the biggest issue in our region was, and still is, the strategic competition between the US and China. The COVID-19 did not change the basic dynamics of this competition. For example, it did not change the players, nor the lineup arrangements of the alliances or the cooperative framework, which has already existed. Also, the thorny issues are similar, and the prospect for an amicable settlement is still quite remote. However, COVID-19 has severely deepened this kind of rift. In face of health crisis and with its entailing economic crisis, the US abandoned its role as a global leader. Rather, President Trump consistently blamed China for the pandemics and urged its allies to participate in the raid to punish the suspect of this global pandemics. So it seems that President Trump found another good pretext to bash on China and to mobilize his support for his adventure of his G2 rivalry ideology. On the other hand, China, with no hesitation, turned its stance to so-called Wolf Warrior Offensive. It asserted more power and influence on the world, where there becomes some vacuums because the US abandoned its role as a world leader. And China has strengthened its grasp in the Southeast China Sea and Hong Kong, as we have witnessed last year. And one other huge consequence of COVID-19, I think, is the weakening of multilateralism. South Korea, especially our current Moon Jae-in administration, has put much efforts to promote and enhance multilateralism in the region. As I mentioned in my presentation, the success of our administration's geopolitical code, the Northeast Asia Plus community of responsibility, it depends on voluntary participation into this platform and seek together and build together some order for regional peace and prosperity. Currently, however, every country is striving to survive. There are some worries that it is inviting the Hobbesian nature of war of all against all. However, it might sound, sorry, it might sound ironic, but I think this crisis proves us the necessity of the community of responsibility that South Korea tries to promote. Because South Korea, as a middle power and one of the countries that successfully controls the pandemic situation, should keep up with this effort. I think the Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Platform is meant to bring together all the stakeholders in the region to maybe effectively address this kind of transnational threats. Okay, now the second question was on the coming of new US Biden administration and the possibility of some changes it might bring to our region. Well, from the hints that President Biden gave out from his interviews, articles, or the published party platform or candidate debates, the newly Biden administration's keynotes seems to be on the recovery of American leadership. I believe that he will make all his efforts to recover the liberal internationalism that Trump tried to break down. So in order to do this, Biden will abandon Trump-like unilateralism and seek cooperation with its allies and return to traditional multilateralism and international cooperations. And I think these visions, these general visions, will naturally dissolve into the East Asia region and his administration's foreign policy towards the Northeast Asia too. So first, in case of China, Biden administration is expected to focus on the strategic competition with China. But this is different from Trump administration because he is unlikely to lead the US into some ideological competition with China. Rather, I think Biden is expected to seek strategic upper hand. It means it is more like typically a dual or two-way approach. And some scholars call it smart bashing of China. This means that he will cooperate in the issues that US has an upper hand or regarding the issues that the US and China can mutually benefit from. Maybe the non-proliferation issue or transnational issues such as climate change, global health security issues, those can be some examples. However, he is expected to stress on the importance of democratic values too. And this is a bad news for China because this means that he will not tolerate the human rights violation issues. And he once called China of committing a genocide against the Xinjiang Uyghur Muslims. And also in terms of trade, many experts believe that Biden will continue to bash on China's unfair trade practices. However, he has signified in his papers that and on the interviews that this process will not be unilateral like the Trump administration, which means that he will gradually build up the mood and rally the allies together to counter China in this economic war between China and the US. Secondly, in case of North Korea, he asserted that he will approach with professional manners and principles. Now, principles will be much more important in this case. He is expected to put priority on recovering the policy coordination with South Korea and other allies in the region. And currently, since South Korea and the US administration both have a progressive orientation, both president has same progressive style, or both Democrat party have similar orientation, this might bring a bond of sympathy that can bring positive developments, inshallah. However, we might not expect any event-like talks with the North. that Trump used to adhere to. So Biden has repeatedly asserted that without any progress in denuclearization process, there will be no talks with the North. So that will be his principle that he might not want to break. However, since his security staff have much experience than the Trump administration in dealing with the North Korea, the Democratic Party and so on, there are some positive speculations that the US will begin a phased approach to tackle the nuclear issue more better than the Trump administration. But there are some negative factors too. If the Biden administration put a higher stress on the democratic value and principle over some diplomatic achievements, the US might arise the regime issues and human rights issues against North Korea. So this might eventually lead to no talk principle, which might result in a stalemate. And lastly, for South Korea and Japan, the key allies of the US in the region, Biden's pro-alliance posture will help the regional actors to recover the alliance system in the region. Biden has consistently called South Korea the linchpin in the area. So we are expecting to recover the US relations and in extension, hopefully recover the triangular relationship between South Korea, US, and Japan. The last question regarding South Korea-Turkish relationship. I think we had a similar conversation before, Professor Mehtan, and I think we both agree that the biggest problem or the most significant issue between our two countries is that we do not have a problem. So that's the biggest problem that we have. And as far as I know, the only thorny issue is the FTA renegotiation. I believe that the trade imbalance issue that Turkey is facing is quite disturbing, but I think it's not only South Korea who has this kind of issue with Turkey. I've heard that also Japan and some other Asian countries also have the similar problem. But since I'm not an economist, I cannot make clear comments to that. So therefore, in terms of geopolitical calculations, I would like to suggest one possible ground where we can work on together. Honestly, geographically, South Korea and Turkey is very far away. However, our relationship is very strong and have trust in each other. In that case, all we need will be a vehicle or a shared platform that can provide mutual benefits. For example, we can use Chinese platform, namely the Belt and Road initiatives to connect our nodes. So we are in the far edges of this BRI of Chinese platform, Turkey on the far western side and South Korea on the far east. If we use this kind of platform for both countries, then we can decrease the cost of interaction between the two. Also, on the middle ground, such as Central Asia, we can collaborate in some projects together by merging the experience and networks of Turkey, which they have in the area, with the skills of South Korea. We can both benefit from it. Or vice versa, for example, in the ASEAN region, where South Korea has more experience and network than Turkey. And in that kind of region, the opposite collaboration, excuse me, the opposite collaboration might be possible. So I think for now, that is as far as I can think of. And while I make more research in APAM, I should think harder and study harder so I can contribute to our two countries' relationship too. So I think that is about it. And if we get some time to have another series of talks, then I probably would like to think of and prepare some ideas regarding the relationship between the two countries. So thank you very much. I think this is it. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. E, thank you very much. We really appreciate. We learned very much from you. And I hope we can continue this talk later again, maybe one or more chapters, because I really want to ask you other questions, because you, as I mentioned before, you taught us very interesting information. Really thank you very much. Evet, sayın izleyicilerimiz, değerli arkadaşlar, Doktor İ'den biz hakikaten çok ilginç bilgiler aldık. Çok açıkçası Türkiye'de çok çalışmadığımız ya da Türk Akademiyası'nda çok çalışılmamış konularla ilgili böylesine ne diyelim kısa ama önemli bilgiler bir Koreli bilim adamının, Koreli araştırmacının gözünden, kulağından, aklından faydalanarak öğrenmiş olduk. Bu hakikaten bizim için iyi oldu. Zannederim bunun ikinci ve üçüncü aşamalarını da sohbetlerini de yaparız Doktor İ ile. Çünkü Kore ile ilgili ya da bölgeyle ilgili açıkçası ben şahsen daha çok şey öğrenmek ve bilmek isterdim. Zannederim sizler, izleyicilerimiz, dinleyicilerimiz de daha çok şey duymak ve bilmek istersiniz diye düşünüyorum. O zaman dediğim gibi inşallah gelecek programlarda Doktor İ ile biz tekrar bir araya gelip Güney Kore, Kuzey Kore, Çin, Japonya bölgeyi daha iyi anlayıp ve bölgeyle Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Devleti'nin ilişkilerinin nasıl olması gerektiğiyle ilgili fikir paylaşımlarında bulunabilir ve bunları da sizlere arz edebiliriz. Yes, Dr. E, once again, thank you very much. We appreciate you are we have I mean time limitation, but really we learned very much from you. So inshallah, hopefully we can make volume 2, volume 3. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please sağlığınıza dikkat edin. Esen kalın. Take care of yourself. Take care of your health. Thank you very much again. Çok teşekkür ederiz.
Thank you very much, Professor. I'll be also looking forward to our next sessions, inshallah. And çok teşekkürler. And
çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Yeah, until we meet again, görüşürüz.
İnşallah. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Evet değerli izleyicilerimiz, bugünkü bu ilk sohbetimiz burada bitiyor. Eğer aksiliklerimiz olduysa, dilimiz sürçtüyse kusura bakmayın. Çünkü bizim için de bu ilk. Zannediyorum bu Covid döneminde bizim de bunlara alışmamız lazım. İnşallah var olan hatalarımız, eğer varsa hatalarımız, dil sürçmelerimiz bir dahaki programlarımızda bunları artık yavaş yavaş ortadan kaldırırız. Çünkü takdir edersiniz bizler de normalde çok işte konuşuyoruz derslerde vesaire konferanslarda ama akademisyeniz bu tip şeyleri çok iyi bilemiyoruz. Bir sonraki programlarımızda, bir sonraki Asya sohbetlerinde tekrar görüşmek üzere. Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Sağlığınıza dikkat edin. Esen kalın. Sağ olun.